High in the mountains of South America, where the air grows thin and every breath feels like a climb toward the sky, where clouds rest upon the shoulders of the peaks, there once spread a mighty realm, Tawantinsuyu, the four quarters of the world. That is what the Incas themselves called their empire. We know it simply as the Inca Empire. When the Spaniards first climbed the slopes of the Andes, they could hardly believe their eyes. Before them lay a land built without iron or wheels, yet with such precision that the stones in its walls fit together tighter than the bricks of European palaces. Roads stretched across deserts and mountain ravines, and along them raced the messengers, chasqui, who carried news faster than any courier in Europe. There was no written alphabet here, but memory itself was preserved in cords and knots, the quipu, woven from threads of many colors. But to understand who these people were, one must forget the usual ideas of what a state is. The Incas did not simply build cities and collect taxes. Their world was woven from faith, sunlight, and labor. Everything they did, from plowing the land to celebrating their gods, had purpose and meaning, as if nature itself were a part of their sacred law. The Inca Empire stretched along the spine of the Andes, from what is now Ecuador to central Chile, more than 4,000 kilometers, embracing the most diverse landscapes, glaciers, tropical forests, deserts, and high mountain valleys. Where other peoples would have struggled merely to survive, the Incas built a system of life based on balance. They tamed the mountains, subdued the rivers, and made the soil yield harvests, even at heights where no trees grow. The heart of their world was Cusco, the navel of the earth, as the Incas called it. From it, 4 great roads extended in different directions, symbolizing the 4 parts of the empire. Along these routes flowed the life of the state, messages carried by runners, armies on the march, caravans of llamas bearing goods, and with them moved the very breath of the empire itself. When one looks upon this wonder, it is hard to believe how little we actually know of it. The Incas left behind no written chronicles. Everything we know comes from Spanish chroniclers, men who saw the empire in its final days. They described it with awe, but also with bias. Thus, the history of the Incas will always be a blend of mystery, legend, and dream. Yet behind that dream lies a reality, an astonishingly organized world where every detail had purpose. It was an empire that lived by the laws of the cosmos, where the sun was not merely a celestial body, but a father, protector, and symbol of divine authority. Where the emperor, the Sapa Inca, was considered the son of the sun, and his word was sacred. The Incas mastered the land without destroying it. Their cities did not defy the mountains. They merged with them, as if they were a continuation of the earth itself. Their faith did not reject nature. It made nature a part of the human spirit. And so, when the Spaniards brought fire and iron, the world of the Incas fell not only under the blows of swords, but also because, together with their bodies, their invisible bond with the sky and the earth was broken. To understand the Inca Empire, one must first behold the land on which it grew. This is not the fertile plain of Egypt, nor the gentle valleys of Mesopotamia. It is a world of extremes, the Andes, a colossal mountain chain stretching along the entire western edge of South America. Here the mountains rise above 6,000 meters. Below lie barren deserts. Above them, forests where eternal mists hide the sun. Higher still, icy plateaus swept by freezing winds. And beyond, at heights where even the air itself seems too thin to breathe, the Incas built their cities. At first glance, it seems like a place made not for life. Yet it was here that the Incas proved that humanity can not only survive, but create harmony. For them, the mountains were not an obstacle. They were sacred. Every peak had a spirit, an apu, and so when the Incas carved terraces or built roads, it was as if they were making agreements with the mountains, not waging war against them. Look at their fields, step-like terraces that seem like stairways rising toward the sky. They were cut directly into the slopes, reinforced by stone walls, and designed to capture and preserve moisture so the earth would never dry out. On these terraces grew maize, potatoes, quinoa, beans, and at times even peppers and tomatoes. It was agricultural poetry, precise calculation combined with sacred reverence for the land. Not a single grain was wasted. Not a single stream flowed in vain. The Incas mastered the art of channeling water. Their canals and irrigation systems gathered it from mountain springs and carried it to the terraces like veins carrying blood through a living body. Their system of agriculture did not destroy the soil. It sustained it for centuries. Animals in this world were more than food. Llamas and alpacas were their constant companions. They provided wool and meat, served as beasts of burden, and their dung was used as fertilizer. The llamas climbed the mountains with the Incas, carrying salt, grain, and woven cloth upon their backs, linking cities and villages into a single living organism. But it was not only the land that nourished the Incas. They also lived along the shores of the Pacific Ocean, where they caught anchovies, crabs, and shellfish. To the east, beyond the mountains, stretched dense tropical forests that offered rare fruits, the feathers of exotic birds, and medicinal plants. The empire was designed so that each region gave what another lacked. It was a unified system of exchange, thoughtful and harmonious, like the circulation of blood in a living being. At the center of it all stood Cusco, the capital, the heart of the world. According to legend, it was here that the sun commanded the first Incas to settle. The city was laid out in the shape of a puma, the sacred animal of strength. Its streets were straight, its stone walls perfectly fitted, and its temples gleamed with gold, reflecting the light of Inti, the sun god. From Cusco radiated 4 great roads leading to the 4 parts of the empire: Tawantinsuyu, Chinchaysuyu, to the north, toward Quito, through tropical valleys; Antisuyu, to the east, towards the wild jungles; Colasuyu, to the south, into the lands of Bolivia and Chile; Kuntisuyu, to the west, toward the desert coasts and the sea. Each road was more than a road. It was a lifeline, carrying the breath of the entire empire. Along them ran the swift messengers, marched the armies, and traveled the orders, knowledge, and offerings to the gods. And all this without wheels, without horses, without writing. Only human memory, strength, and will. Nature was not their enemy. It was their ally. When the sun rose over the Andes, the Incas bowed in prayer, not from fear, but from gratitude. For it was the sun that gave them life, warmed their fields, and filled their hearts with the certainty that each day had meaning. And perhaps this was their greatest secret, that in a world where everything around them could kill, they learned not to conquer nature, but to live with it in harmony. Their empire grew not from conquest, but from trust, in the earth, in the sun, and in humankind itself. Long ago, when the world was still young and the stars spoke to the earth, humankind lived in darkness. They wandered through cold valleys, knowing neither law nor craft nor faith. The earth was chaotic, like a dream without beginning or end. And then the sun, Inti, the father of light and life, looked down upon the world and pitied his lost children. From the heavens, he sent to earth 2 beings, brother and sister, husband and wife, Manco Capac and Mama Oclo. They rose from the sacred waters of Lake Titicaca, whose shimmering surface was believed to be the gateway between worlds. In their hands, They carried a golden staff that shone like the sun itself. And Inti said to them, "Go forth upon the earth, my children. Where this staff sinks easily into the ground, there you will find the center of the world. There you shall build a city, and my people shall be born." So the children of the sun wandered long, through valleys, over rocks, across veils of mist, until one day, in the heart of the mountains, the golden staff sank softly into the earth, as though the spirit of the land itself had welcomed it. Thus was born Cusco, the navel of the earth. Manco Capac became the first Sapa Inca, the son of the sun, the founder of the royal dynasty. He taught the people to till the soil, to build houses, to weave cloth. Mama Oclo taught the women to spin and care for their homes. From that time on, the Incas believed they were not merely a nation, but children of light, sent to bring order to chaos. But the myths of the Incas were not mere tales of gods. They were maps of the universe, where every mountain peak, every river, every stone possessed a soul. To the Incas, the cosmos was alive. It was divided into three realms: Hanan Pacha, the upper world, dwelling place of the sun, moon, and stars; K Pacha, the world of living beings, of humans, plants, and animals, where life flows; Uku Pacha, the underworld, realm of the ancestors and of seeds, where all that is new begins to grow. These three worlds were bound together by bridges of energy, and humankind was a part of that living connection. Death was not an end. It was simply a return to Uku Pacha, a descent into the womb of the earth, to one day be reborn in the light of the sun. The Incas did not merely worship the sun. They saw in it a living being, a father who each morning rose into the sky for the sake of his children. But the sun was not the only god. Above all stood Viracocha, the creator, he who shaped the heavens, the earth, the people, and the stars out of chaos. According to legend, he once departed across the sea, promising to return. And when, centuries later, bearded strangers, the Spaniards, set foot upon Inca lands, the people believed that Viracocha had come back. Thus, myth became destiny. Alongside the sun and the creator, the Incas revered Killa, the moon, wife of the sun and protector of women; Pachamama, the earth mother, both generous and stern; and Ilapa, the god of thunder, lightning, and rain, who carried the jug of heavenly water in his hands. Even the stars were not mere lights to them. They were animals, ancestors, and guardian spirits, watching over children in their sleep. Every element of the world was connected to every other, and within this web lay the wisdom of the Incas. If a person insulted the earth, failed to thank the sun, or wasted water, he disturbed the sacred balance. And balance was the highest law of their universe. To live in harmony with the earth meant to live rightly. A special place in their faith was held by the Huacas, sacred sites where, they believed, the powers of the world converged. These could be springs, mountain peaks, stones, or even trees. People brought offerings there: maize, woven cloth, llamas, and sometimes human lives, not from cruelty, but from the conviction that without sacrifice, balance could not exist. Their religion had no written dogma, only ritual, memory, and reverence. Each generation passed on its legends by word of mouth, blending history and faith into a single living stream. And so, when we try today to discern where myth ends and reality begins, that boundary nearly disappears. Somewhere in the shadow of the sacred mountains, among the rivers and valleys of what would become Cusco, lived the first Incas, the descendants of Manco Capac and Mama Oclo, the children of the sun. For a long time, they were merely one of many tribes scattered across the cold plateaus of the Andes. Their world was small, their strength modest, and enemies surrounded them on all sides. but they had something the others did not: a belief in their destiny. They believed that it was the sun itself who had commanded them to bring order into chaos. And this belief, like an inner flame, gave them no rest. In those times, every tribe lived for itself. People fought over water, over land, over food. Valleys flared up and faded like fires in the wind. But the Incas, they did not only fight, they built. Step by step, they strengthened their city of Cusco, surrounding it with stone walls, raising temples and storehouses. At first, to protect themselves from neighbors, and later, to inspire awe. Thus, from a small mountain village, Cusco became the heart of the world, the navel of the earth, as they called it. The true transformation began with one man. His name was Pachacutec, meaning the one who turns the world upside down. He was not born a king, but a warrior. Yet it was he who became the architect of a new era. When a powerful tribe, the Chanca, approached the walls of Cusco, the Incas stood on the brink of extinction. The old ruler wanted to flee, but Pachacutec stayed. He gathered his warriors and inspired them with a speech, promising that the sun would not abandon its children. And then something happened that later would be called a miracle. It was as if the Incas were filled with a divine light, and they drove their enemies into retreat. From that battle began a new era. Pachacutec became the Sapa Inca, the first great emperor. He not only defeated his foes, he transformed the very idea of power. From the Inca tribe, he created an empire, Tahuantinsuyu, the 4 regions of the world. He divided the lands into 4 parts, each governed from the center, Cusco. He introduced a unified system of roads, taxes, and administration. Each conquered tribe was required to pay tribute, but in return, they received protection, food supplies, and participation in the grand design. The conquered peoples were not destroyed. They were woven into the fabric of the empire, preserving their languages and customs, yet acknowledging the power of the sun and his son. Pachacutec was not only a conqueror, but also a builder. He turned Cusco into the stone heart of the empire. Under his rule rose the Temple of the Sun, Coricancha, whose walls gleamed with golden plates reflecting the morning light. He ordered the construction of roads that crossed mountains and deserts, binding distant lands into a single living body, thousands of kilometers, without a single wheel. After Pachacutec, power passed to his son, Tupac Yupanqui, a warrior and explorer. He marched north and south, expanding the empire's borders to the coasts of modern Ecuador and Chile. Under his rule, the roads stretched like veins through the body of a giant, connecting hundreds of tribes and nations. It is said he even saw the ocean and, awed by its power, offered a sacrifice to the gods beyond the edge of the world. After him came Huayna Capac, the ruler of the empire's dawn and dusk. Under him, Tahuantinsuyu reached its greatest power. But in those same years, the first cracks appeared in its veins. While the empire flourished, something unseen was already approaching on the horizon. A virus brought from afar, diseases the Incas had never known. And behind them, strangers with fire, steel, and horses. But that would come later. For now, in the time of Pachacutec and his descendants, the empire shone like the morning sun. From a small mountain tribe had risen a power whose influence spanned nearly the entire Andean world. Their cities stood at the height of the clouds, their roads ran through eternal snow, and their faith united millions. They believed that all this was not for the sake of power, but for the sake of balance. That their empire was not merely a state, but a reflection of the cosmos on Earth. That every person, every llama, every stone had its place in the great order established by the sun. When the sun rose over Cusco, the entire empire already lived in the rhythm of its light. And this rhythm was not merely a symbol. It was a law that governed everything, from the breath of a farmer to the decisions of the Sapa Inca himself, the son of the sun. The Incas created a state in which every person, every family, every valley had its place, like a link in an immense chain where no link could exist without another. And it was precisely this sense of unity that made Tahuantinsuyu a living being whose breath could be heard from the glaciers to the ocean. At its center, like a heartbeat, pulsed Cusco, the sacred city, the heart of the empire, from which 4 great roads radiated outward in the 4 directions of the world, leading to the 4 main regions: Chinchaysuyu, Antisuyu, Kuntisuyu, and Kolasuyu. Each was governed by a representative of the Inca and possessed its own system of control, taxation, storage, and ritual organization. Yet all obeyed the single center, as rays obey the sun. The Inca state had no money, no markets in the usual sense. Its economy was built upon an exchange of labor and a sacred debt to the community. This principle was called aini, reciprocity, the sacred duty to help one another, because everything done for others would return through the sun and the state. Every person belonged to their ailu, the community. Together, members of an ailu cultivated fields, built roads, and gathered harvests. Part of that harvest went into state storehouses, kolkas, located everywhere along roads and mountain slopes. Enormous granaries where maize, potatoes, dried meat, llama wool, and all essentials were kept for times of famine or war. Managing this system required extraordinary precision. The Incas had no written language, but they had quipu, a system of knots tied on multicolored cords that stored information about taxes, supplies, people, and land. Only special officials, the quipu kamayoks, could read and compose these living chronicles, turning knots into the memory of the state. Above all stood a strict yet harmonious hierarchy. At the top, the Sapa Inca, the only Inca, the son of the sun, regarded as a sacred being whose word was law. Below him, the nobility, descendants of ancient lineages, priests and generals. Beneath them, administrators governing the provinces. And finally, the commoners, the backbone of the empire. Yet despite appearances, this was not tyranny. Everyone knew that their work had meaning, that their life was part of a grand design. Even labor was not seen as humiliation, for to serve the sun was to serve the entire world. The empire was bound together by a vast network of roads more than 40,000 kilometers long. They wound through mountains, deserts, and valleys, with rope bridges of vines, stone stairways, and roadside stations called tambo, where travelers could rest, replenish supplies, or pass messages. Along these roads ran the shaski, messengers, tireless runners who carried communications using memory and quipu. Thanks to this living network, a message could travel from one end of the empire to the other faster than a courier in any European kingdom. The Sapa Inca did not rule alone. He was surrounded by a complex council of nobles, warriors, and priests, each responsible for a particular domain: lands, roads, rituals, or order. Every conquered people had the right to preserve their customs and languages, but had to acknowledge the power of the sun and pay tribute, not in gold, but in labor and harvest. That is why the empire did not collapse under its size. It stood not upon fear, but upon a shared duty. The foundation of governance lay in the 3 laws, known to all, from ruler to peasant: Amasua, Amalula, Amaquila. Do not steal, do not lie, do not be lazy. These simple words were like a code inscribed into the heart of every person. Their observance was not merely moral, It was a way to preserve balance between humans and gods. To break the law was to disrupt the harmony of the universe. The Incas knew no private property in our sense. The land belonged to the sun, the people, and the Inca. It was divided into 3 parts: for the temple, for the state, and for the community. Everyone knew which portion to cultivate, whom to assist, and how much to contribute, and thousands of officials ensured this balance. Yet remarkably, the system functioned without violence. The state cared for orphans, the elderly, and the disabled, for weakness was not seen as shame, but as a test, one in which society had to show its strength. Thus arose an empire without paper, without written decrees, yet with perfect memory, where information was transmitted not by letters but by rhythm, through the knots of quipu, through the tales of elders, through rituals and songs. In this world, there was no bureaucracy, but there was discipline, no money, but there was honesty, no wall between the people and power, because power wore. Life in the Inca Empire flowed like the sun over the Andes, measured, steady, unhurried, yet filled with an inner strength that gave meaning to every morning. The economy of this civilization knew no money, yet it understood the value of labor. Wealth was not measured in gold, but in the usefulness a person brought to their elu, their community, and to the state. From birth, every individual belonged to 3 worlds: the family, the ailu, and the sun, and everything they did was part of a great exchange where the concept of personal gain did not exist. Work was not punishment, it was a prayer. When the sun rose above the mountain peaks, men went out into the fields. Even terraces carved into the slopes like steps to the sky filled with movement and song. The Incas sang as they tilled the soil, believing that Pachamama, Mother Earth, could hear the song, and that if one worked in silence, she would remain deaf and give no harvest. Women at that same time spun the wool of llamas and alpacas, weaving fabrics whose patterns carried meaning, signs of the clan, the region, or symbols of the sun. Cloth was not merely clothing, it was a document, a passport, and a prayer in one. The ailu, the community, was the heart of everything, like a family, but greater. People worked together, shared their harvests, built each other's homes, raised children, and cared for widows and the elderly. If a household lost its men, the neighbors would come to work its fields, for no one could be left without support. This was called aini, reciprocity, one of the main laws of life. Today I help you, tomorrow you help me, the Incas would say. And there was no calculation or debt in these words, only the natural rhythm of trust. But there was also another kind of labor, mita, the public service, in which every adult man worked several weeks a year for the state, building roads, bridges, temples, and storehouses, cutting terraces, serving in the army, or transporting goods. This was not considered a burden, but an honor. To work for the sun meant to serve eternity. Thus, when the mita ended, people returned home not with exhaustion, but with pride. The empire's economy functioned with astonishing harmony. Everything produced was recorded on quipu and stored in the state warehouses, kolkas, built along mountain slopes, where the dry air preserved grain for years. During times of famine, these stores saved entire provinces. There was no market, no merchants. Distribution was overseen by officials who ensured that everyone received what they needed. And if one ailu lacked potatoes, supplies were brought from another. The state functioned like a living body, each cell nourishing the others. The Incas' food was simple but varied. The staples were corn, potatoes, quinoa, beans, and chili peppers. Meat was eaten rarely, usually dried in the sun as charqui, preserved for long periods and served on feast days. They knew dozens of varieties of potatoes and could store them for years, freezing and drying them in the cold Andean nights. They drank chicha, a fermented corn beverage prepared by women and offered to gods and people alike during festivals. Houses were built of stone or adobe, with thatched roofs, low and sturdy, made to withstand cold and wind. Inside there was a hearth, several clay vessels, a loom, and sometimes a small altar for offerings to the spirits. Everything was simple, yet within that simplicity lay harmony. People did not live for luxury, they lived for balance. The Incas' days were far from dull. They knew how to rejoice. Festivals held a special place in their lives. Each month was dedicated to a deity or natural force: harvest, rain, the sun, or the moon. During these times, the fields rested. People dressed in their finest garments, danced, sang, and brought offerings to the gods: corn, flowers, textiles, llamas. In festivals, labor and faith, body and spirit, came together. For joy itself was seen as service to the sun. Even death did not break a person's bond with the earth. The dead were not buried deep. They were mummified, seated in a crouched position as if in sleep, and placed beside homes or in temples. Relatives brought them food, spoke to them, and asked their advice. For the ancestors never truly departed. They continued to live among the living. The life of the Inca was an unending conversation with the world of spirits, for they believed that every mountain peak, every stone in the field, every river, and even the wind itself possessed a soul, and that without showing reverence to these forces, a person could not truly belong to the universe. The sun was the supreme being. It gave life and light, rising above the mountains each morning, and from its dawn depended on the order of the entire world. Thus, every morning, the Inca people bowed before it, praying, giving thanks for the night that had passed and for the new day that had come. Even simple labor in the fields was a form of prayer, and every harvest was a sacred gift to Pachamama, the Mother Earth, without whom life itself was impossible. Their temples, especially the great Coricancha in Cusco, shone with gold, reflecting sunlight like a fragment of heaven on earth. Within those walls, priests guarded sacred relics, conducted elaborate ceremonies, and observed the movement of the sun and stars, interpreting them as the will of the gods. At the center of this spiritual hierarchy stood the Sapa Inca, regarded as the son of the sun, who personally led the rituals, for he was seen as the divine mediator between heaven and earth, between gods and mortals. His word was not mere command, it was the will of Inti, the sun itself. One of the most solemn and awe-inspiring rites was the Capacocha, the ritual of sacrifice, most often of children, not out of cruelty, but from a profound belief in harmony and cosmic balance. The Incas believed that by offering what was purest and most innocent, the sun and the spirits would bless the earth with abundance and peace. These ceremonies were accompanied by feasts, music, songs, food, and prayers. Death, in this context, was not seen as an end, but as a passage into another realm, the upper or the lower world. The spirits of the departed did not vanish. They remained close to the living, protecting and guiding them. Families and communities honored their memory, bringing offerings, asking for advice, and expressing gratitude, maintaining a living dialogue across the veil of mortality. Equally sacred were the waka, holy places such as mountain summits, lakes, and stones where the energies of the world converged. People would walk long distances, sometimes for days, to bring gifts, speak with spirits, seek counsel, or mark events that could not occur without divine approval. The Inca calendar was precise and deeply tied to the solar cycle and the agricultural seasons. Every festival and ritual corresponded to a cosmic rhythm: planting, harvest, the solstice, and the equinox. They observed the stars, the sun, and the moon to determine the right times for sowing and reaping. For them, festivals were not mere entertainments, but acts of universal alignment in which music, dance, song, and brilliantly colored garments became a language of communication with the gods. Even war and conquest were woven into this sacred dialogue. Before setting out to battle, priests would perform purification rituals, bless the warriors' weapons, offer sacrifices to the mountain and sky spirits, and pray for victory and minimal loss of life. Upon returning, the warriors would be greeted with grand celebrations, songs praising the sun, and offerings of thanks to the ancestors, for balance, once disturbed, had been restored. Thus, religion was not a separate sphere of life, it was life itself. It infused every step, every breath, every act of labor, from the sowing of seeds to the rising of armies. The Inca did not see themselves as masters of the world, but as part of its great breathing whole, a universe in which reverence for gods and nature was inseparable from respect for oneself. When you climb the terraces of the Andes and gaze upon the cities of the Inca, it seems as though they have grown out of the mountains themselves, because their stones lie so closely together that it feels as if nature itself wished to create homes for humankind. The architecture does not dominate the landscape, it flows with it, woven into the rhythm of the slopes, the direction of the wind, and the path of the sun. This harmony is felt in every detail, from the walls of Machu Picchu to Sacsayhuaman, where stones weighing tens of tons are fitted together with such precision that not even a knife blade or a sheet of paper can fit between them. Inca art was never mere decoration. It was both meaning and knowledge. Their carvings in stone, clay, and wood told stories of ancestors, symbolized the cosmos, and conveyed information about harvests. Their textiles, woven with intricate patterns, were like a form of writing. Each color, each line carried a specific meaning. Through these fabrics were passed down laws, genealogies, and legends. Yet architecture was only one facet of the Incas' mastery of science. They understood how to control water, how to store harvests, how to heal, and how to predict the movements of the sun and stars. Their agricultural terraces were not simply fields. They were an advanced irrigation system capable of gathering rain and dew, directing water through stone-lined channels, and preventing erosion. These terraces allowed crops to thrive, even in the harshest mountain conditions. Their granaries, built on windy slopes, preserved grain and potatoes for years, all of it planned with the precision of engineers and the wisdom of people who worked in harmony with nature. Inca medicine was equally astonishing. They knew the healing powers of herbs and plants, used natural antiseptics, and practiced cranial trepanation, opening the skull to relieve injuries or internal bleeding, with such care and skill that many patients survived. They achieved this without iron, without modern tools, relying only on their knowledge, intuition, and deep understanding of the human body. Astronomy was a living science for them. By observing the sun, the moon, and the stars, the Inca could predict seasons, determine the timing of planting and harvesting, and set the dates of festivals. Even the orientation of their temples and roads followed the solar cycles. During the solstice, the first rays of light would fall precisely upon sacred altars, flooding them with gold and ore. Cities were never placed randomly. Their locations were chosen based on terrain, wind direction, soil quality, rivers, and water sources. Every settlement became a masterpiece where science and faith merged into one. Even their bridges, suspended over mountain rivers, were engineering marvels, woven from grass fibers and wooden frameworks strong enough to carry people and animals. The knowledge of how to make them was passed down orally, from master to apprentice. Their vast network of roads connected every corner of the empire: cities, villages, fields, and sacred sites, creating a single body of the state through which information, goods, and energy flowed like blood through veins. The art, architecture, and science of the Inca were not merely expressions of culture. They were reflections of their worldview, their faith in harmony, and their understanding that humanity was only a part of a greater whole, where every action, every stone, and every star held meaning. This is what made their civilization so extraordinary. They built not for power, not for beauty alone, but to connect with the world, with the gods, and with themselves. And when the sun shone upon their mountain cities, it seemed as though the very world smiled back, recognizing their wisdom, their skill, and their knowledge, which allowed them to live in balance with nature, to create wonders that would outlast centuries, and to leave behind a legacy we can still see and feel today. The Inca Empire was vast and powerful, but like any living body, it was fragile because its strength did not lie in weapons or wealth, but in harmony and faith. And when the Spanish appeared on the horizon, everything teetered on the edge of destruction. This did not happen instantly, nor was it the result of a single person's actions. It was a chain of events in which disease, politics, faith, and human weaknesses intertwined, and every step taken toward the foreigners brought the great civilization closer to its end. At first, rumors reached Cusco of white men arriving from ships with fire, steel, and horses, which no one had ever seen before, and many believed this was the return of Viracocha, the great creator god, who, according to legend, had gone beyond the horizon but was destined to return. Faith in this miracle caused distrust among their own warriors and internal fractures, because part of the nobility believed that the sun had allowed these people to enter their world, while another part wanted to fight. At the same time, the empire faced an internal crisis. Huayna Capac had died, and the country plunged into civil war between two heirs, Atahualpa and Huascar, each with supporters among the nobility and provinces. Instead of uniting against the external threat, the Inca exhausted their strength fighting each other, weakening the army, destroying trust between provinces, and leaving roads and fortifications vulnerable, while anxiety grew among the people as the familiar order collapsed. Meanwhile, diseases brought by the Spanish, primarily smallpox and measles, unknown to the Inca, spread with incredible speed, killing thousands, including nobles, warriors, and ordinary farmers, disrupting the rhythm of society and depriving the state of key administrators. The Inca, lacking immunity, did not understand what was happening and believed it was the wrath of the gods, which further undermined faith in the authority of the sun and the Sapa Inca. In 1532, when Francisco Pizarro and his small force of a few hundred men crossed the mountains and reached the Cusco Valley, before them stood an empire that seemed invincible, but was in fact weakened by disease, internal conflict, and confusion. The Spanish, armed with firearms and riding horses, things the Inca had never seen, quickly captured Atahualpa, one of the claimants to the throne, offering peace and negotiations, but betraying him and taking him prisoner, thereby paralyzing the leadership of the empire. The people were stunned. The son of the sun was captive. The war with the enemy was unclear. Disease continued to take lives, and faith in harmony crumbled. After Atahualpa's death, the Spanish slowly but steadily expanded their control, capturing cities, destroying temples and granaries. Although the Inca attempted to resist, their methods of warfare, based on mass raids and traditional strategies, could not stand against the weapons and tactics of the Europeans. The people, having lost their leader and faith in order, succumbed to fear and confusion, and even those who wished to defend the sun and the empire lost their strength in these conditions. Many cities were destroyed, temples looted, golden ornaments and ritual objects carried away, and the very faith of the Inca came under pressure. The Spanish imposed Christianity, destroyed Capacocha sites and huacas, banned languages, songs, and rituals, attempting to dismantle the foundation of their world. Gradually, the empire fragmented into Spanish-controlled provinces, where people continued to live, but no longer in harmony with the cosmos. Instead, they lived under fear and foreign law. Although the Inca Empire fell under the onslaught of foreign invaders, its spirit remained alive, because true power is never measured by gold or armies. It is measured by knowledge, traditions, the memory of people, and their connection to the land. This spirit continues to live in the Andes to this day, in the terraces that are still cultivated by the descendants of the Inca, in the roads that connect distant villages, in the fortresses and temples where stones, as if remembering every touch of the hands of ancient builders, have stood for millennia, reminding us of mastery and harmony. The Quechua language, spoken by the Inca, did not disappear. It remains alive in the mountains and valleys, in songs, legends, and oral traditions, in the names of rivers, peaks, and lakes, in everyday speech, linking people to their past. When someone utters the word Pachamama, it is as if they are once again addressing that very Mother Earth who was worshipped thousands of years ago. Festivals and rituals, though they have undergone changes, have preserved their essence. Celebrations of the harvest, solstices, spring, and rain continue to take place in the Andean valleys. People dance in bright clothing, sing the songs of their ancestors, and bring offerings to the land and animals. These actions, just as before, strengthen the sense of unity, mutual aid, and gratitude for life. Inca art also lives on in folk crafts. Textiles with patterns that once conveyed laws and genealogies now tell the stories of ancestors. Ceramics, wood and stone carvings, jewelry, and amulets carry symbolism reflecting their cosmos, combining practicality, beauty, and spirituality in each piece. The terraces and irrigation systems created by the Inca continue to nourish the land, providing harvests even in the 21st century, while the roads, bridges, and steps carved into the mountains are still in use, connecting villages and towns, uniting people just as they once unified the entire empire. This connection serves as a reminder that civilization is not only a state, but also the ability to live in harmony with nature and with one another. We also owe much to the science and knowledge of the Inca. Their expertise in agriculture, astronomy, and medicine is studied by modern researchers, inspiring engineers, agronomists, and doctors. Their approach to managing natural resources serves as an example of sustainable development, where humans are not masters, but partners of the earth and the cosmos. Finally, the legacy of the Inca lives in the people themselves, in their relationship with the land, with family, with the community, with the sun and the stars, in the value placed on labor, mutual assistance, and faith in harmony. In the memory that a civilization can be great not because it conquers others, but because it knows how to live in accordance with the world, with the gods, and with itself. And when today we climb the slopes of Machu Picchu, look at the terraces, roads, temples, and peaks of the Andes, we understand that the sun of the Inca never sets. It shines across the centuries, reminding us that true power lies in knowledge, harmony, and memory, and that those who learn to live in this world can become children of the sun even thousands of years later. Thank you for watching this video until the end. If you enjoyed it, please support the channel. Give it a like and subscribe so you don't miss new videos.